Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Sarah Gergel, and I work with the Living Archives Project, where we are collecting stories of how COVID-19 impacted various communities in Charlotte-Mecklenburg County. Today is December 12th, 2022. This week there were 196 reported cases of COVID-19 in Charlotte-Mecklenburg County, which shows a little bit of an increase, 11%. Over the last 2 weeks. Therefore, we are both comfortable not wearing a mask today. Krystel, would you introduce yourself?
Sure. I am Krystel Green. I am the mother of two, and I am married to a fantastic man. And I'm here doing this interview with you to talk about my experience with COVID.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Krystel, would you also describe your physical image for us?
Sure. So I am an African-American woman with brown, or I always wanted to say black eyes, but actually brown eyes, and brown hair with some gray streaks in it, probably giving away my age just a little. I'm only 5 feet tall, but I like to think my personality is a big one. So although I have a short stature, that doesn't mean that I'm short in any other way.
Yeah, I love that. And you have a really great smile.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
So, Krystel, tell me, how long have you lived in the Charlotte area?
I have lived in Charlotte, I think, since 1998, maybe.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so, where did you come from?
I came from, so that's an interesting question. I came from Greenville, South Carolina, but that was just because that was my first job out of college. But I am originally from Charleston, South Carolina.
Hey, so not that far.
No, not at all.
Just
not
a few hours north.
Exactly.
That's great. And so how have you enjoyed living in Charlotte? Because you've been here through a lot of transition.
Yes, I have really, really enjoyed it. It's a great place to establish a career, and it's also a great place to have a family.
Awesome. I'm really glad to hear that. And so you're a mom of two.
I am.
How old are your kids?
My girls are 16 and 13.
Wow, that's a good age.
Yeah.
Man,
Yeah, fun.
I bet.
Yeah.
I bet. So as a mother, over the last 2 years, you've probably had to transition through some seasons with them probably doing school at home for a season.
Yeah.
And then all of that. What was that like for you?
I have been blessed, or I am blessed, with two very conscientious little girls. And so transitioning to doing schoolwork at home actually was not as hard as I had heard that it was for other parents. My kids know that school and education are a big part of our household. So as far as, hey, let's set up a routine with you getting up just like you are going to be going to a physical place, you're going to get up, get dressed, and go to your computer. And they both were set up in different places in the house, and were allowed to make their space whatever they wanted it to be. I think my youngest, she ordered all of these school supplies so that she could be set up just like she would be at a physical classroom or a separate school building. And then they went about the business of attending every class just like they would if they were going to school and being with their classmates. I think one of the things that they probably enjoyed more was that if they did need to take a break and wanted to run and get a snack, they could. And then lunches, I think, were a little bit better than what they might have experienced if they had gone to school.
Yeah. Were you home with them during that time?
I was home. I was home probably 3 days out of the week, 2 to 3 days out of the week.
And so were you the one making those great lunches?
My girls are old enough that they can make their own lunches. So they would either make theirs, or if I was making lunch, I'd make enough for everyone.
Yeah. Okay. That's great. So we did this activity together before we started the interview called a hand map. Is there anything from your hand map that you would like to share with us?
I don't know. I prefer you to ask me questions.
Okay,
so
that's great. That works out too. So over the last 2 years, we've gone through a lot of transition with restrictions and with them being lifted slowly and then them all being lifted. can we start at the beginning?
Sure.
When the restrictions when the pandemic kind of started in Charlotte, what was that like for you? And what was it like going in lockdown? Did you have to stay at home, or were you working outside of the home? Or what was that like?
Very uncertain. No one had ever experienced anything like this in recent history. So I think for me it was disconcerting. And formerly I worked at Charlotte Area Transit System. So we provided an essential service. Folks could not get to work if we did not have buses on the street. Now, I was not an essential worker. However, I do remember when we ended up having to modify service, which is very odd because usually you only have to modify service if there is some sort of detour or if something happens like a snowstorm where you physically cannot move a bus or a train. But this was different. It wasn't about having barriers such as inclement weather. It was about having barriers of a disease or sickness or illness that nobody really knew anything about. So I think in those beginning days when there was the lockdown, when we did have to change our service in the way we worked, it was just, I didn't know what was going on and did not know what was coming. I don't know if you remember, folks seemed to think that this wouldn't last very long. And we were so wrong about that. So I just feel like in the beginning it was very, very unsettling.
So what kind of, you use this term and I already forgot it, but what kind of things did you have to do with the buses that limited their capacity?
And calling on my memory here, certainly we blocked off seats. And I hope you've been on a bus before. If you haven't, you should get on one. But with public transit, people sit next to each other. And that's how it's always been. But we ended up having to block off seats. Our operators obviously were masked up. We had people enter through the front door and exit through the back door. Just changes of that sort that were different. And because we had to do that, that meant that you could carry less passengers. So now because you can carry less passengers, you have to make the determination, do you put more vehicles out on the street? Well, if you put more vehicles out on the street, that means bringing more people into work and bringing more people into contact with other people. And I think you remember the thing was to try to limit your contact with anyone outside of, say, maybe your household as much as you possibly could. So it was a real quandary, if you will, on how you were going to offer this essential service, but still keep employees safe, but still deliver the service.
So what did you guys resolve? Like, what did you guys end up doing?
So essentially what we did was we did put service out on the street. We did keep it going. But I think passengers were accepting that buses may be late or there may be a bus that when it gets to you, it might be full and you may have to wait on the next one. We did try to fill in the gaps with additional buses. But again, it's all about people and safety and that sort of thing. And I felt like CATS did a good job or tried to do the best that they absolutely could in keeping employees safe and also keeping passengers safe.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I wonder, I don't know if you remember, but during that time of lockdown, did you feel like the usage decreased because people were staying at home? Or do you feel like since essential workers still had to get out, still had to move around, was it kind of the same or did it not change?
Well, if I remember correctly, what we saw was with our express services. Those were folks who may have a car at home, but they chose to ride the bus for whatever reason. Maybe they didn't want to park in uptown, or maybe their spouse or partner used the car and they took the bus in. Some people used it for convenience. What we saw was a significant drop in that ridership. Okay. However, more of our local routes, the ones that were traveling through the city of Charlotte, we did see ridership there, but certainly it wasn't the same as before COVID for obvious reasons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Wow, that's such an interesting job. And so did you see during that time frame, after restrictions were kind of lifted and the rate of spreading COVID decreased a little bit, how did that impact cats?
We started adding service back, and I'm trying to pull on my memory here. It has, and so much has happened. I know. And honestly, and I'd be interested to know if you've heard this throughout your interviews, there are just certain parts that you don't want to remember. Yeah. Sometimes when things happen in your life, you either put a mental block on them or you say, hey, we are past that, and you push that to the back of your memory. So anyway, I'm trying to think. We did add service back. We did see some return to bus service. But of course, I think with everything that happened with COVID, with all of the information and misinformation, and the fact that we were still learning at the same time, I think that there may have been a hesitancy to return to crowded spaces. Yeah. And whether that be a bus or a mall or a sporting event, particularly an indoor sporting event, I think we as a community probably saw just some hesitancy and some decreased numbers to return to how we were living our lives before the pandemic.
Yeah, totally. That is something that a lot of people share, and it's very natural to have the hesitancy when you're so uncertain.
Right.
And there's so many misinformation that
right.
you don't know what's real, what's not real.
Right.
So in your experience over the last 2.5 years in your personal life or working with cats, was there like a story or an experience that really sat with you that kind of touched you in a certain way?
I think just the amount of time that my family and I spent together. I mean, it was from, sun up to sundown. We woke up together and then we all pretty much went to bed at the same time as well. And really just getting to know each other better, and also probably getting sick of one another and all of that togetherness. But I think that's human nature, that after a certain point, you're like, okay, I just need a moment to myself. And the introvert in me, every now and again, just, okay, we got a lot of togetherness going on here. But I have such a great family that I'd say 95% of the time I was good with us being together.
That's wonderful. What did you kind of create new traditions or create new, some people are like, as a family, we started FaceTiming every Sunday, and we still do that. Is there anything that you kind of implemented in your family life?
We started going on walks.
Wow.
Yeah, throughout the neighborhood. Every day we went on a walk, sometimes more than once a day, just to kind of get out of the house and see the rest of the world. The rest of the world, as much as a neighborhood could be the rest of the world. But that was something that we did together that I really enjoyed. And we still do, maybe not as often. And during the warmer months, we do it more so than during cold weather. But we will still go out on a walk together just to see what's going on in the neighborhood. And we also started to notice that there are bunnies all over our neighborhood. Wow. So there would be certain places that we would stop and look for the bunnies. And I think this year, my youngest daughter and I noted that we did not see them as much. Okay. So hopefully they haven't left the neighborhood, but we would see them all over. And we would stop and marvel. And you would think something that simple you wouldn't marvel about, but we truly would be like, it's a bunny.
Yes.
And everyone would get excited.
I love that. It's the simple things.
Exactly.
You know? I feel like so much has happened the last 2.5 years, and there's been a lot of hard things. Mm-hmm. But I feel like it's also given us a perspective, allowed us to kind of go back to simple ways and not be so consumed. At least in the U.S., we're always like work,
exactly.
go.
Exactly.
And we kind of had a moment where we're like, well, we can't work so much. And we're spending more time with family. And we're getting to take nature walks and enjoy nature and animals around us. And that's beautiful. Do you feel like your community has changed throughout the last 2 years?
I live in a quiet community where if you see your neighbor, you of course wave and smile. But as far as folks communing and whatnot, not so much of a big thing. So when we would see one another, you could still talk, because if your neighbor is on their porch and you're standing out in the street, that's a safe distance. You didn't have to worry about spreading COVID. So you would see a lot of that. Yeah. And certainly with our neighbors, that's pretty much how we would communicate. Mm-hmm.
Is there anything that you would say that as you reflect upon the last 2 years, was there something that you can say like, wow, I gained this from my own experience?
Let's see. That's a tough one for me because work did not end for me. Because I am not an essential worker and at the time was in senior management and had a team of 30 folks. It wasn't like I was expected to just shut everything down. Obviously, there are jobs and professions where you have to be out in the community, and maybe you stayed home one week and then went in another week and did your job. Maybe you worked on an alternate schedule. That was not the case for me. I still worked every single day remotely, and many times going into the office and whatnot, to the point that I even had a protocol that I set for myself. So walking in the building and making certain my mask was in place. Getting to my office, and the first thing I did was put sanitizer on my hands and then proceeded to wipe every single thing down with a wipe, and then spraying the office down with Lysol. Then, because I was in an office by myself, I was able to take off my mask and go about working. That is what I did every day for a year, maybe even more. Just that helped me feel safe. Whether or not it worked or anything, that just helped me feel better about what I was doing. So as far as what I gained, I think what I saw in myself and what I saw in my family and some of my friends was resiliency. That ability to say, okay, this thing is happening. How are we still going to survive? How are we still going to try to lead our daily lives? It may not have been easy. Every day may not have been the best day. There probably was a lot more stress related with living at that time. However, I think COVID showed many of us that we can make it through anything.
Yeah, I love that perspective, and it's so true. As a people group, you know, we did become more resilient, and we did have to handle a lot of things that were thrown our way, unexpected things. As someone who was kind of managing 30-some people during that time, what was that like for you? What did that feel like? Because I feel when you manage people, they're constantly calling you. Their uncertainty kind of comes to you up that ladder.
Right, absolutely. I think for me, the most important thing was trying to give people grace. If you needed to tend to your kid and help him get online, and that took you away from your job for a few minutes, particularly if you were one of my employees that could work from home, then I'm not going to ding you on that. You should be able to do that and feel like there will be no backlash from you having to do that. Now, I did have employees who they had to be in a specific place doing their jobs. There was just no way that the job could get done without them going into a specific place. One of the things that CATS did was there might have been a week in the office and a week out of the office. And that was really to help limit interaction. So let's say if someone did get COVID and maybe it spread to another employee, it didn't spread to every employee. So you had one group that worked 1 week in the office and the other group that stayed at home but were on call for any time we needed someone to come in. But again, just trying to really give folks grace. And if someone did contract COVID, show some compassion. I don't know anybody who wanted to get COVID or tried to get it on purpose. So if I did get a report, particularly from one of my essential workers, that they had COVID, okay, well, let's show some compassion. Let's give them a call and check on them and make certain that they're okay and see if there's anything that they need. And then, of course, make certain that that work is taken care of. And that's where that second group came in that you could call in. So, you know, again, just really giving people grace and showing compassion. I think that that was probably the biggest thing that I could do. Work still had to get done, but certainly I could try to help figure out how we could get it done so that you felt safe as well.
That's beautiful and very important because life, you know, was impacted in crazy ways, and grace and compassion, especially from a superior role. That's an incredible perspective that you had, Krystel. Really amazing. I remember I had a conversation with a different agency who worked with a lot of people with disabilities, and one of the groups that they worked with were people who couldn't see, who were blind legally. And they told me how, I just want to encourage you, they talked about CATS, and they said that CATS really stepped up for their employees in that time frame and supported their people and so helped them get to work because they were essential workers. And that was just really encouraging. And I just wanted to share that with you.
Oh, thank you.
CATS really made a difference in people's lives at that time. And I can imagine that it was challenging, but it's also incredible to see how that came out.
Oh, awesome. Good to hear. Good to hear. Because, you know, sometimes when you're in it, either you don't receive that message or you don't hear it because we got to get this thing done. So certainly it is nice to hear in this setting, because you didn't even know I worked for CATS before I said it, to hear that there were others who felt like they were supported and positively impacted during a really rough time is that makes you feel good.
Yeah, I'm glad it did because it's the truth. And so now, as you've kind of, back when you still worked with CATS, as the restrictions were lifted, what was that like for you and your role? And then kind of how did you transition out of CATS?
It was still scary because remember, we still didn't know anything. So even with folks saying, you know, hey, you don't have to wear your mask indoors anymore. Unfortunately, because of what I do, I'm in the communications industry, marketing communications. The CDC, there were a lot of messages coming out and a lot of mixed messages. And honestly, you did not know what to believe. So because we've had all these mixed messages going on for a year now, when you tell me you don't have to wear your mask, my first thought is, are you sure about that? And so maybe, and they did say, you know, certainly if you want to wear your mask, you can. Still continue to wear a mask. Still continue to maybe stay away from crowded places, particularly because I do the grocery shopping for my family.
Okay.
So I still went every week on Sunday. That was one of the things I kept going. Routine is a good thing for me, and it is for my family. But I still had my mask on, even though you notice other folks walking throughout the grocery store without a mask on. If my girls were with me and we heard somebody cough, we were moving on. We were pushing that buggy and we were getting someplace that wasn't near that person. Whether or not they had COVID, they could have been coughing just because they were clearing their throat. But because you were still uncertain about what was going on and what was coming, we still took those same precautions because it did seem like having that mask on was one of the best things and one of the easiest things that you could do. So I think, though, as more time passed, started to feel a little more comfortable. I think we started going back to restaurants and actually sitting down and eating at them, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago. Okay. Maybe a little more. But it's been more recent than, I know some folks that pretty much didn't change that, and that's okay. You get to do whatever you feel is right for you and your family, but we really stayed away from things like that for quite some time. And so making that transition with restrictions being lifted, as far as work was concerned, still was able to work from home, but I probably was going into the office more. For my staff, one of the things I implemented was you could work from home 2 to 3 days a week, if you could, if your job allows you to do that. And then after a certain point, I made it where you had to come into the office at least 2 days a week. And that seemed to work well. In my industry, it actually can be difficult for communicators to not be in front of one another, actually having these face-to-face conversations and whatnot. But I still wanted to be respectful of folks who were feeling kind of like, I still don't know what's going on and what's coming. And I think we struck a really good balance. But certainly I let every employee know, if this does not work for you, if you still have concerns, no matter who your manager is under me, you come and talk directly to me and let's have a conversation about what's going on, how you're feeling, and let's see if we can figure out something.
Yeah, that's great. In terms of your girls, how did they transition back into school?
I think going back to school was probably one of the best things that could have happened for my children. I think my oldest child adapted a little bit better than my youngest child. But I think getting back into that physical building, going through the process of getting up in the morning, getting dressed, and then getting in the car and me taking them to school, I think that was helpful for them. I think being able to interact with their peers was helpful for them. But what I did see was my youngest child become a little more reserved. Yeah, so, but my oldest child, she jumped right back in. She, she just kind of started doing her thing and just really interacting with folks. Whereas my youngest one, she seemed a little hesitant, but I think not any more hesitant than anybody else was at that time. But just saw some changes in her. So what I'm seeing now, though, is she is getting involved in clubs and doing more things where she's interacting with more folks. I'm really excited about that for her.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And you said she's 13?
She's 13 now,
okay.
yes.
Yeah, that's a good age. It's an age where there's just a lot of transition.
It is,
life,
yeah.
So getting to be more socially, involved, that's great. That's really great to hear. So, to honor and respect your time, is there anything that you wanted to share with us before we finish up?
I don't think so. I think if I had to make closing remarks, if I had to do that, I think, again, just that resiliency and seeing how folks can really pull together, whether it's your own small family unit, or even if it's a larger one, whether it be your neighborhood or your community of people, or even your job that's pulling together to make certain that others have what they need. I think that shows something about the human spirit. And that is something that gives you hope. We see a lot of terrible things in the world today, particularly with technology advances. But we also got to see a lot of good things in the world as well. And so I try not to dwell on the bad things and focus on the good things. So I feel like if we could get through COVID as communities, whatever that word means to you, then I feel like we can get through anything. And that's not to lessen the folks who passed away, because I know some who did. That's not to lessen the folks who have long COVID and have been struggling with those side effects. But that is to say something about us as people, in being able to say, okay, this thing is going on, but we're going to do the best that we can to make it through. Yeah. There's something special about that.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing, Krystel.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your time and just for sharing your story with us.
Absolutely.
We really appreciate it.
Absolutely.